I've gotten my picture done. Everything's labeled. Now I'm ready to think about colors. So complementary colors, again, are the colors opposite each other. So I chose red, violet, and yellow, green. So red, violet, yellow, green, straight across. So you can see what the colors look like. That is why we have a color wheel. We have it at the front of the room, and you have one on your table as well. You only want to get one of those colors plus black and white on your mixing palette at a time. So basically you're going to go through and you're going to paint everything that is going to be red, violet on the paper. Then when that's done, you'll come back and you'll paint everything that needs to be yellow, green on the paper. So I've got my red and I've got my violet. I have a cup of water. I've got my paint brush. It's wet, but this paint does not need it to be wet, so it is not watercolor. This is called tempera paint. It's thicker paint. It's already wet for you. You don't have to add water. Only time you put your brush in the water cup is if you're changing colors. So I'm going to start painting inside of here, okay? So I want to mix up some red violet. So I'm going to change to violet. So that means that I have to clean my brush. So I've got my red violet mixed up, and there's all different tones, shades, and tints to the red violet. So if I have something that's red violet that is touching something else that's red violet, I can make a different shade, tint, or tone to do that. So a tint is when you take the color and you mix it with white. A shade is when you take the color and mix it with black. A tone means that you're going to take gray and mix it with a color. We have learned about tints, tones, and shades before. That's why we're not overly going into how to do that. Now, something that you could think about doing is erasing the letters as you go along, so that way they're not going to show as much. But again, it's one of those things that I'm going to put this thick paint over it, so it's going to disappear. Well, I need to make a little bit more of my red violet, so I don't want to mess up my red and violet completely, because I want to make some different tones and shades and tints of that. So I'm going to mix this up, and notice I'm not spreading it all over the mixing palette. So I go through and I'm going to paint my mountains in, paying attention to spreading it out. Now it'd be pretty darn boring if I just go through and paint all of this, just this one red violet. That wouldn't allow me to see these details. So again, I've got to use those tints, tones, and shades to make it an interesting looking picture. So I'm going to do a small little section of this, and then I'll talk about the tints and the tones and shades a little bit more. So again, I'm going to the edge of my shape. This is a project that you really have to pay attention to what you're doing. If you stop in the middle of what you're doing to talk to somebody, you're going to forget that this line is your line for the shape, okay? And then you're going to make mistakes, because if you're not paying attention, you just might paint over the top of it. So again, you have to be really careful of what you're doing. So I can't see the separation between these two mountains, so I want to make sure that I can really tell that. So I want to make this mountain back here a little bit darker. So I'm going to make a shade to go over that. So now that part of the mountain is a little bit darker, so I have different values in that. If it starts to mess up, I get out of the space, then that's fine. So I've gotten all of my mountains finished. And now I've got this bush that's red violet that's going to go on top of it. If I use the exact same red violets, nothing's going to show up. So again, it comes down to that adding that value in. So I'm going to do a tone for this tree that is here. So a tone is black and white plus the color. You can see I've got more colors kind of spread out everywhere. So I'm going to put my purple, then my red. I'm going to kind of give it a little spin to get the extra out. Wipe the extra water off. I've already got some black on there. So I'm going to add just a little bit more. And so now I've got my tone created. I've still got red violet. It's just a different tone or value of it. So I'll go through and paint this. This is when you need to have different size paint brushes. The medium or large every single time might not work. So you got to be really aware of the space you're going to be painting. Now, I want this one and this one to look a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit more white to the tone. So now I have a lighter tone than I had before. It is not a tint because it's not just pure white. If it was pure white, then it would be a tint. I got to be really careful to stop at the line of my shape. So again, it's that thing of you really got to pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure I got enough paint to cover up those letters. And so now I think I'll do the same tone for that. Now that I've got this section done, I can move on to another section. So I'm going to use this tone for the red violet here. Whoop, it's okay. It's a little darker, but that's all right. So that's outside the shape. So then I would just go through and figure out what else I need. This is outside the shape over here. Well, I want this and this to look the same. So I know I'm going to use that same kind of tone. But again, I'm going to have value with it. So it might be a darker tone and a lighter tone to it. And this one also needs to be. So again, it's a lot of contemplating and thinking as you're working your way. So it's going to be a little darker here and get lighter. So I'm going to continue to work on my red violet. Now that I have finished painting everything red violet, I'm ready to clean this. You can see I still got a lot of black left. I want to make sure I leave some of that. I have a lot of space, but I'm worried that when I'm mixing, I will get into my red violet and mess up my yellow green. So I'm going to show you how to clean your mixing palette. Mixing palette. So I'm going to turn the water on gently. Put this under. This will not do anything. If you just stand here, let the water go over it, it takes forever. Take your hand, put it down in the sink, and rub it. Once you do that, it's clean. You turn the water off. You take one paper towel. You're going to quickly dry this. Dry your hand off, and then you're ready to get your next color. So that is how you clean the mixing palette when you're ready to switch colors, and at the end of class, that's how you clean it as well. I've got my yellow green, and I am going to make sure my brush is really, really, really clean. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing with this. So I'm going to make sure I get plenty of yellow. Clean and brush. If your water cup seems very dirty, so like when you put your brush on here and it has the color of the water still, then you might need to clean your water cup. Again, that's one of those personal choice kind of things, right? If you're making like yellow greens, yellow orange, those kinds of things, if it does not look light enough, like you don't have enough yellow in it, then put more yellow in it. That should be kind of common sense. So I'm just going to go through the same process, and I'm going to paint my yellow green items, and I'll create tints and shades and tones within that. So that is what you do once you get that made. So I'm not going to use that yellow green again, so I know I want to switch it. I want it to become a little bit lighter, so you have different values of your color. So now that I've gotten that lightened up, I'm going to go through and I'm going to paint that. So that is what we're working on.